I'm going to go ahead and get us rolling here. Good afternoon and welcome everybody. If you're just joining and you haven't had a chance to yet, please go ahead and pop your names in the chat and tell us where you're calling in from today. For those of you who don't know me yet, or maybe you're joining one of these sessions for the first time, I'm Sky Landgraf. I'm our Director of Partnerships and Programs here at We Are Moving the Needle. I'm super excited to welcome you all to this week's We're Moving the Needle Fix the Mix Career Workshop with the fabulous Eva Reistad. As you all know, community really sits at the heart of what we do here at We're Moving the Needle. These workshops are designed to connect students, early career professionals, with leaders like Eva from across the music industry for mentorship and career development. And really, this is our opportunity to help you all remember that you're not on this journey alone. These sessions are also really designed to provide some tangible grounding and to some of the practical questions you're facing in your day to day. So thank you to everyone who has submitted a question as part of your registration. We've tried to weave those into the conversation for this afternoon, but also please know that we're going to have some live Q&A as well following our kind of moderated chat. And so please do start jotting down your questions as we go, pop things into the chat. We're going to have lots of time to dig into all of these good stuff. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Eva here. She's based in LA, she mentioned in the chat, and she is a Grammy award-winning mixer and engineer specializing in score mixing, Dolby Atmos, record mixing. Her credits include so many fabulous things from Alien Romulus, Dune, Planet Earth, Bad Boys, The Independent, Lion King, and more. And welcome to Eva. So as we get started, do you want to share a little bit more about where you're calling in from today? You're in the studio.
I'm in the studio. My studio's in Hollywood. So I'm up off Hollywood Boulevard Hollywood isn't what everybody thinks it is. It's not so fabulous. So I'm not seeing movie stars walk down the street, but it's a great little area. So it's sunny out today also, which I was saying earlier is it's nice that we're getting to this point. It's actually kind of nice.
Nice.
Minus the AC having to run in the studio all day. But whatever. It's good.
Messing with your audio sound.
Yeah, probably. Bit of
Yeah.
compression on. Is it really? Or
No, no,
is
no, 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 no. I
oh
meant like when you're working.
yeah, it's a good frequency. I'm trying to pull out of the mix. Perfect.
So as we get started here, let's start at the beginning. What's your origin story? How'd you get started in the industry? When did you know you wanted to be a mixer?
Well, this story. Now I always try to find new creative ways to say it because I'm like, should I start from birth? I was born in Duluth, Minnesota. No, I am from Minnesota though. So I'm from a very small town in Minnesota. I've always been a musician. I was, in piano lessons as a kid. I started playing saxophone in middle school, was in jazz band, in high school was in choir, et cetera, et cetera. And, I've never been great at school. I have some learning issues. I have a bit of a ADD situation going on. So if you have similar, you understand how really difficult it is to focus on things. I get distracted easily, but music is something my whole life that I will just keep going. I will just keep working at it, no matter how bad I am at it. It's the one thing in my life I have a lot of patience for, even though the reward isn't always instant, which is also why I would say this career has been all right for me, because it's a very slow, steady pace of always learning, which is good too, because I, get bored. So when I was in high school, a friend of a friend of a friend of my dad's, we found out was an audio engineer in Minneapolis. And Minneapolis, if you guys know, is where Prince comes from. Bob Dylan is actually from my town, which is pretty crazy because it's a very small town. So Timothée Chalamet actually visited during his filming, which was like the biggest thing that's ever happened in that town. So I digress. So basically I ended up going to audio school in Minneapolis, and I went for 16 months, only 16 months. I got an internship through meeting a producer in Minneapolis who is the son of a very well-known songwriter called Jerry Lieber. Lieber and Stoller, these guys are like even generations past mine. So if you're younger, if you know Elvis and the song Stand By Me, like, won't you stand by me? He was the son of one of the songwriters of this team who was very famous back in the day. They have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, if that says anything. So I met this guy, and he was just playing with some of the Prince crew. Prince is big in Minneapolis, obviously. And so he got me an internship. His brother had a studio in LA, and I was like, young, and I was like, what should I do? How do I make it? And he's like, I've never had to know ever that, because obviously his dad, like, he's been in sessions since he was 5 years old. But he was like, I'm gonna get you an internship at my brother's pop studio. So I was like, great, I'm gonna move out there. That's what I'm gonna do. So I moved out the day after I graduated college, which was pretty crazy. And that kind of kicked off my career, from interning to assisting to moving around studios to freelancing. I've been freelance the whole time. Even though I've kind of been at dedicated studios, I've never really been an employee of any of the studios. So that was kind of the origin. It was a path that, my parents, I'm lucky, not a lot of parent support, but like I said, they were like, if you go to a normal college, it's like the likelihood. I like to socialize more than I like to do homework. So that would have probably presented a problem. So this ended up being the perfect mix of work and creativity for me.
I love that. Obviously, like network and community are super key in this industry. And, in your story here, you've just highlighted like how important it was getting to like make that first connection that then kind of becomes the snowball effect to all the other connections you've built throughout your career.
Right.
For someone who's starting out, like what's a great way to build visibility and exposure? Even if you're in a small town like Duluth, like getting that kind of bridge into LA. How do you find people that you've maybe had as interns or assistants, or what do you recommend for someone in today's market, kind of putting themselves out there?
I mean, there's a lot of different avenues you can go down. I suggest hunting them all down, which is exhausting, but it will get you to where you want to go. There's no easy way, there's no quick way. For some people there are, but I recommend a couple things. I actually it's not all one. I wouldn't say it's linear. So these days I always suggest to people, one, find people on your level, because when you start out, you don't have much experience. You're not very good, and that's just the truth. I was not very good. I didn't know what an EQ even did. I was just like pushing and pulling. It was kind of god awful. So saying that, I found friends who were in bands, and I would record them for my school projects, and I would kind of find locals, people my age, my classmates, and which I know at Berkeley, it's a really good spot to do that. And I know at schools that are smaller, not always good to do that, because you don't always have a ton of musicians if you're engineering. But finding those people on that level are actually really, really cool. I had a friend that I recorded. He was my high school best friend, and I recorded him. And he actually fired me when I was in college and hired my other best friend, who was my roommate in college, and had him record his band, which was really funny because none of us knew what we were doing. But here we are 10 years later. Now he's in a really amazing bluegrass band in Minneapolis. And I actually recorded and produced their record last year, which was awesome. So it's things like that, right? It's like you make these connections then, and then down the line, they'll pay off. So that's one way, which is the hard way. And when you're starting, you really kind of feel out of water because it won't make you money. It just takes time,
Mhm.
and it's just dedication. That's the passion part. Now, the go-getter part is the part of finding people who are above you, mentors. I used to just cold email engineers, because we're like not rock stars over here. We're pretty accessible. You know what I mean? It's like we're not, unless you're maybe working with someone big, big, but even people like that will generally respond. We don't have millions of followers. We have like a couple thousand. So it's like if there's someone you see and you respect their work and you like their work, reaching out never hurts. Reaching out and going, do you need an assistant? I always tell people, because they're so green, don't offer to do something that you probably can't right away. But what I do say is, if, hey, if you even have like drums from a record that you're working on or whatever that you'd want to throw me, once again, this is kind of like the not getting paid part. I don't usually pay my assistants until I know I don't have to double check their work. And even then I have to double check their work. And when I do, I kind of hit them for it. I'm like, because that's why they're hired. That's why they're getting paid, right? So,
Yep.
which by the way, I don't believe in making people do a lot of work for no money. I don't believe in that, but I do believe we are in a service industry. So if you're waiting and you're a waitress and you're learning how to waitress, they're not going to be paying you. That's why you start out as a hostess and then you go up to waitress and then you become a bartender, right? Because you learn more and more about the service industry. You start getting paid more. So finding people along those lines, and that can be people on the internet. Internet these days, that's kind of the deal. So Instagram, I'm not on TikTok. I don't know how many people, I mean, actually, I know a lot of successful people now on TikTok. So whatever, TikTok, go ahead. But a lot of people are still on Facebook, which I know is like so not cool anymore, but that's also a good way. So, reaching out to those people far away from you, and then also people in your immediate network, like people at Berkeley, I'm like, link in your teachers, right? Because the teachers at Berkeley, and even I did this at my school, they are involved. That's how I met this producer because I was like sticking my neck out. They had a live show, and I said, "Let me come over. Let me make you guys coffee. Let me do whatever." Which is like such like a cliche thing to say, but cliches are cliches for a reason. Like when I have someone hang out with me at my studio and they're like, "Can I get you an iced tea next door?" Which is like my like first love. I'll just be like, "Yes, please." And I immediately love that person. I'm like, "Come by the studio, whatever you want. Play me your mixes, do whatever." It's stuff like that for people in your network as well, because then you actually have a personal, repertoire with them is
Mhm.
also really important. So I would say those are kind of two big things that I recommend to people. You have to kind of stick your neck out a little bit in the beginning, while simultaneously not being too in it. So offering just being there as support, a lot of people want that actually, and a lot of people need that. Offering instead of asking so much to be given. Sometimes I have people just I have a lot of people ask me, "Hey, can I have help? Can I have help? Can you connect me with people? Can you this and that?" So great, love it, love it, love it. But it's when people are like, "Hey, can I come over and do whatever you need for me?" Instead of them sitting here and just asking me questions. That stuff really pays off for people. Really pays off when you want to help out. It's kind of a give and return. The whole industry is this career. So
Yeah,
I always
being a value add in the room. Yeah.
yeah. And when you start out, you have to give a lot. You have to give a lot. But when you start giving, karma gonna come back at you. So
I
those
love
are,
that.
yeah. So that's my thought on that topic.
No, I think that's really, and I think it's really apt the way you kind of brought it back to the service industry piece. I think that's a kind of evergreen question in terms of how do we advocate for ourselves, but also balance what skills you really do realistically have and realistically what you're bringing to the table at any given time and kind of recognizing where you're at. And I think that training model is actually a really apt one that makes sense. So
Yeah.
that's lovely.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious. So you started in music, but you have done a lot of really fabulous work in film now and TV and working with score mixing in particular. And how did you kind of make that transition from the music side? I mean, you balance both also. I do want to honor that piece of things too, but how'd you get into the film world?
I got into so going back to like one connection through one connection through one connection. I've bopped around a lot of studios in LA. I've done like stints of like 2 years at studios. I was running a studio in East LA called King Size. There was who is now one of my best friends, this guy Forrest, who did a quick session there. He just recorded some strings and I got pretty burnt. You tend to get burnt when you put your whole life in. It was like a 7 day a week gig, running interns, yada yada. So I kind of departed from that, and was freelancing, working at a restaurant, yada yada. And Forrest called me one day and was like, "Do you know Pro Tools?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I know Pro Tools." So he was like, "Do you want to come assist me on Wonder Woman, like the score mix for Wonder Woman?" Because his boss at the time, Alan Meyerson, was moving on to mix Dunkirk. And I said, totally. That sounds so exciting. I've always loved film score music. This was at Hans Zimmer's studio in Santa Monica. And I was like, oh my God, like such a fan. So I ended up going there and helping him. Um, and oh my God, was I in over my head to, I had never been more in over my head with Pro Tools in my life. It was just like so many tracks. It was like, holy beep. It was crazy. So anyway, I was freelancing and I kind of wove in and out of that studio. They bring me back to do stuff. And then Forrest moved on to work for a composer because he also actually wanted to be a composer and he's actually both. It's like annoyingly talented guy. And he was like, Alan wants an assistant. Do you want to do it? And at that point, I had been in LA for like 7 years, run studios, already assisted, burned myself out over and over again. And I was just like, you know what, though, let's do it. Because I was a fan of Alan's too. Alan is one of those mixed with a master's, guys, you know. So I was like, you know what? Yes, let's do it. And that kind of got me started. And that kind of sealed the fate, honestly. Working for a mixer. Because when you don't work for a mixer, and you're just on your own, it's really hard sometimes. Like you don't know if you're doing good. You don't know if you're, mixing is hard to figure out. I never thought I would be a mixer. I was like, I'm just gonna track, it's gonna record for the rest of my life. And then watching him really gave me that like, whoa, like hearing what he did, seeing what he's doing, gave me so much insight, into that. And that kind of carried me through. Like I met people, I would, I started meeting other composers through that, through just the chain of people, and it's a big environment over there at that studio. It's actually mostly composers. Hans only has like 2 rooms. Other than that, it's just all people who work on their own situation. So you get to meet a lot of people, younger people, older people, assistants of composers, and that's kind of what launched me into like being able to work and learn the craft of film mixing better.
That's really cool. And I'm really struck by the way you've kind of spoken a little bit here at various points, like the balance between your freelance work and maintaining work in studios, and this burnout piece, and like how you've kind of gone about reinvigorating yourself at different points. And I'm wondering if we can chat about that a little bit more, like what's helped you when things have gotten like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, that like the everything of it all, whether that be like a specific project that's like been, burning you out, or like just the whole gestalt of it all burning you out. How do you keep yourself sane? What's kind of helped keep you going?
I mean, look, it like sucks because like we all have to make money, right? So this industry, I gotta tell you, like I have friends because a lot of us are freelance, even the artists, even the composers. There is still no answer for any of us because it's such an emotionally invested job because as a freelancer, you're getting hired based on your work, but you're also getting hired based on your hang. So if you're not getting hired, you're going, A, is my work good enough? B, is my personality good enough? Do people like me? Whatever. So there are mental gymnastics in this industry, which I gotta tell you, I haven't even figured out. I have days where I work out. I wake up and I'm just like, what am I doing? Like literally yesterday, I was like, what am I doing? Um, and I always kind of tell, I think there's kind of like I go by like a 2-year rule, which is if you solidify something, because in engineering, there's so much stuff you can do, right? So there's like I've worked in podcasts, Atmos, recording studios, film studios. You can do post-production, you can do immersive stuff now. You can do audiobooks, you can do literally whatever you want. So for me, it was just like I've always been doing this, like I said earlier, on based on passion. It's like and music was my passion. So it's like you kind of have to find I know I'm just rambling. This is a hard question to really answer like in a straight line. You kind of have to find what you like. But for me, I found when like my passion starts dropping off, that's when like I think you have to make a change, right? So when I'm working in a studio for 2 years and I'm just burnt and I'm like I have nothing left, that's when you can kind of move on to the next space. I was working in a pop studio, one microphone sessions. It just wasn't for me. I have a lot of friends who love pop sessions. They like do hip hop all night. Like these girls, they just love it. And I'm like, I don't know how you guys do it. It's not for me, but that's what they like to do. And so they manage the burnout because they still have a passion for it. So if you have a passion for recording bands and recording drums, then that you're going to find that niche. And then, but someone said to me one time, which was crazy, is that they said to me, they're like, look, sometimes you're even going to hate, something you love. Like we all end up hating something we love sometimes, because I was like, do I even like this? And I'm like, listen, like you have a significant other, if you have family, like you love things, but sometimes you're just like not going to love it. So that's something I also try to keep in mind. Other than that, like go on a hike, go see a movie, do
Yeah.
that. So that helps sometimes.
Yeah. I love that. And I really love the way you're talking about like all the different opportunities out there. I think it can be really easy. We've heard from some of our early career folks and our students in our network, like it can feel daunting on the flip side of that. Like there's so many options. But I think what you're saying here that is really beautiful is that, you don't also have to commit yourself to an area of the business that isn't bringing you passion, right? So if pop in hip hop recording is not bringing you passion, there are so many other different, ways that you can build a really fruitful and meaningful career. And you don't have to stick with something that's, making you go, oh my God, why am I getting out of bed in the morning? And I
Yeah.
think that's a beautiful thing.
And even if you do, it's like, it's really funny. I'm a singer-songwriter. I mix so much every day that the last effing thing I want to do at the end of the day is pick up that guitar and sit here and be like, man, like I do not like because I'm mixing all day. I have friends who are editors, they edit podcasts, they sit at home and they edit, or they don't really have studios, but they have a desk. So guess what they want to do at the end of the day? They have energy to go make dinner and then sit and write a song. So you also can do fun shit stuff, tech stuff, and work in audio if like that's your passion and whatever you want to do. And then you can still find time to like do stuff on the sides. Like I don't do records that often, but what I do take on now, I call them like when I do like records, I only really want to do them if I'm producing or mixing them. I'll record too, but I do it for cheap because it's fun because I get to have my input. And I say, I'm like, I'll do this if I can produce. So you can really start dipping your feet in everything, which is great. Like I'll edit an audiobook 5 days a week for like whatever, 5 hours a day if I can make money and pay rent and then have time at night to go do whatever I want. Like if I want to go out with friends, if I want to, because when we're talking that work-life balance, that does end up being a really big thing. Because if you lose yourself in being at the studio 12 hours a day, unfortunately, what I've learned is that there's a lot more to life than just getting your what am I trying to say? Your validation through work, which when you're
Mm,
starting, you invest so much in this that you start making it. But then what happens when everything evens out? You have to kind of find stuff to do. So I tell people you can veer down different avenues because and once again, I worked for like I met a rock producer and then he started working at a podcast company. So it's so weird. Every time I've like run out of work, I used to get a call from him. Hey, can you hop on this show for like a couple months? I'm like, absolutely. Like I would love that. And then I can do that until I do something else, right? And
mm.
I know when I'm doing podcasts, I'm like, this is like not that fun, but it gives me time to do other shit during the day. I'm like, well, now I can actually have a normal schedule. I don't have to wake up and go to the studio and just be like grinding, you know? So I
Yeah.
highly recommend that to people, you know, a lot, actually, a lot, because you don't want to pigeonhole yourself.
Yeah, vary it up for yourself. I love that. Let's talk about some craft questions. We've got some questions that some folks submitted, one of which was, are there different ways that you approach working on score mixing versus when you have worked on like pop records or other record mixing projects?
Right. So, score mixing is very different than record mixing because score mixing is basically that those mixes are like locked and loaded, they're approved. So for record mixing, I get to go in and like do my thing. So I get to
Mm,
like I just did this bluegrass record I was talking, which is really fun because I get to kind of decide the panning. I get to decide like what the vocal's gonna sound like, my reverbs, my delays, all that kind of stuff, which is really fun. But you're starting from scratch, which for me, it's like sometimes like I'm like, ugh, it's like too much work for me. But so that's kind of like record mixing. It's a very creative brain. And you work with the artist. So it's more of like it's an interesting relationship. It's like the artist is kind of the star. Whereas with film mixing, the director is the star of that show, right? It's not the composer. So the composer is the artist, and technically, I am the composer is my client. The director is the composer's client. So when I'm mixing for a composer, it's not my job to make the mix sound practically that much any different than the reference mix. So with score mixing, referencing is a massive thing. We have to reference back and forth the mix all the time, because basically what I just do is I add a lot of width, and what I'm doing is I'm putting it in surround. So I have a 7-1 room. So I have to be very careful when I'm doing that. Like I use reverbs, I use surround delays. But it's not my job to like add, like I do sometimes, but I really have to be mindful of this stuff. So when it crashes down to a stereo mix getting sent for approval to the composer, that it doesn't sound washed out, that it doesn't sound, too different. So if anything, when I'm adding a live orchestra, I'm adding movement to the piece. We're adding like the expensive sound over the samples, or I'm giving the percussion more power. But we say this a lot. It's like giving it power without volume, right? Because I'm not changing the levels. When I start a film mix, the faders all come in at 0. The stems match the reference exactly, which with record mixing, it's like we got drums, we're starting faders down and then like starting to bounce out. We're like touching all those faders. Where for me now, it's like with film stuff, I don't do that at all. It's like pulling
Mm-hmm.
frequencies, right? It's like cleaning up the mix and everything, just enhancing.
And do you find from like adapting your mixing techniques, do you feel like there is a major difference between when you're working on like traditional orchestral scores, like you're talking about here, things like Planet Earth, or your more electronic heavy scores that you may have worked on? Do you feel like your techniques have to change a little bit there between those two things?
I mean, yes, I mean every cue is so different in a film. It's really interesting. It's actually like sometimes like the smallest cues are like the hardest to mix, right? When it's just like a piano. This happens in records too. It's like when it's just a piano and a synth, you're sitting there. I'll sit there for like fucking 45 minutes being like, is the piano too loud? And I'm like, what am I doing? So it's like sometimes I put more focus into things like that. But like I've said, I can't go too far. But like then sometimes the composer will hear it and they'll be like, could you have done more something with the piano? And I'm like, okay. And with electronic stuff, a big thing that we have to listen for in film is dialogue and sound effects. Okay. So if there's like a big scene and there's like cars and all this stuff going around, it's like the synths, you kind of have to be listening to the frequencies of the dialogue and effects. We usually work most of the time with the dialogue and effects stem, which isn't mixed. It's not the final mix, but it is so we can pop it in when we're listening to the music. And that's why it's not actually important for me to add a lot of high end, because dialogue sits in the 2 to 3K range, right? So when I'm mixing for film, I'm not like adding a bunch of high end to get the music to stick out, because if anything, that's reserved for the people who are talking, right? So we don't want it to be fighting. So with action stuff, it's like with drums, it's like I'll add low end, to the drums. I'll clean up the low end and I'll add low end usually. Like I said, energy without volume is like an important thing, because I want the cue to stay balanced, but I also want us to have like a driving feel, because sometimes a composer's rep will just kind of feel kind of flat. So what I try to do with big action stuff with all these synths is I really try to make it a bit more 3D, a bit more wide, and I'll take synths and I'll spin them around the room and stuff like that, so it's like everything isn't sitting so static, because a lot of stuff will just sit. So arpeggiators will put like a tremolo on it, so it's just everything is kind of like moving. That's more of like action heavy synth stuff. And then for orchestra, mainly it's just like mainly it's really just movement. Usually it's like really paying attention to the movement. It's more of a feel thing. So there's like big sweeping moments, it's just like or automate it, make it sound beautiful. Planet Earth was very much about automating the orchestra. Composer was really about like feel like I really want to feel the waves, you know? So because they play, but like we do a lot of automation to push them so it actually really feels like you're moving. And then finding little elements to kind of get to stick out a little bit more, like putting decapitator on a little like percussive shaker, or like adding a big reverb to the cymbal so it rings out and you know and everything kind of melds together. So sometimes I try to pull everything apart and get it to sound totally batshit, like, you know, so we're like giving a lot, like, so it's very interesting, like, oh my God. And then sometimes we're just trying to pull it together, basically. So sometimes I'll just be like, pull up the master, you know, compressor, and then sometimes I'll pull my master like compression down, and it's like, all right, now we're vibing, we're letting like the picture do the work. You know, so yeah, anyway, really, really long answer to that question. Sorry.
No, that was, I love that. Um, from a workflow perspective, we have a question that's been asked around like best managing your time when tackling like a big mixing project. Do you have a specific process or routine that you use for every movie, or is it a little bit different between different projects?
Um, yeah, I do. It's so funny. I was in a class the other day and actually shared my screen. I won't do that here because we're just talking. But so because per movie we have a lot of cues per movie. So the way movies work is they write cues. Cues can be anywhere from a minute long to 3 minutes long. They do this because picture changes so often, and so and because cues change, they can't write just one big piece of music that spans the whole movie. It would just never work with revisions, right? So they work in little pieces, and that way they can also export scenes to the director in like a quick time. So, what do you think about this 3 minute scene? What do you think? And so it gets pieced together. Um, and it sounds like it would be a nightmare, but it's actually pretty streamlined now with a lot. We streamline it. So number one, there's a cue sheet. So a cue sheet is a Google document. We use QDB, and this has all the lists of all the cues on it, the names of the cues, the time code starts. Time code is a really big thing with us in film because the movie is burned into a time code. So when you see like the boop, 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 like at the beginning of movies, sometimes when that hits, we're usually hitting an hour. So the
Mm.
hour rolls, and then the composers write to the time code in their session. So you know how in Pro Tools, when you're working in pop, you like start at bar one every time. For us, it's actually spotting across the timeline in Pro Tools. So for us, we have numbers on the cues that go in real order because they used to film movies in film reels, right? Now we have digital, but it was reels. And the reels only have so much time. They have like 15 given less to 20 minutes, depending on the reel, depending on what's going on. So we actually work reel 1, 2, 3, 4. And then our cue numbers are labeled. So 1M1, 1M2, 1M3, and then we go into reel 2, 2M4, 2M5, 2M6, 2M7. So we have a cue sheet with all these numbers on it, and then all the time codes, all the whatever, and then also on it we have different lanes. So the lane is delivered to mixer, approved by director, still writing for director, small changes. There's like all these things that the composers use, and then I hop in on the end. I don't give a shit about all that, but that's how they keep track, right? Small revisions. This is the theme we're using because the director wants us to bring the theme back in. And if you guys know what I'm talking about with themes, think Pirates of the Caribbean. That's the easiest thing to think, right? So da da da
Mhm.
da da da, right? So
Yeah.
they keep track of all that stuff in these sheets. Like the director wants a theme again here. We want the theme now, but now it has to be huge because it's an action scene. Now we just want it to be a bell because Jack Sparrow's fucking, you know, randomly walking around. So we all kind of use this master sheet to pay attention to. And then for
Mm.
file management, they will go, if there's a recording lane, we're recording in Budapest, we're recording guitar overdubs. And then when those get finished, they will X them off, right? So what
Mm.
my assistant will do when they bounce stems out, or they'll actually give us Pro Tools sessions. So they give me a really large splits, right? So strings, percussion high, percussion low, woodwinds. I mean, everything, synth long, synth short, synth, you know, sound effects, effects in the session, endless. Sometimes I get 60 stems, right? They split it out that far. And so my assistant will take all the stems. We usually always print a click track, and will assemble the sessions for me. Thank God. And actually our template stays the same throughout the whole movie. So I mix like 5 cues because I have the same stems. I deliver stems to the dub stage where they mix the whole movie together. So their stems actually get funneled down into smaller stems that I'm creating. And so it actually stays pretty much the same. And the further I get into mixing a movie, the easier it gets because the same sounds will repeat. Like I'm talking about
Mm,
themes. So
yeah.
once this theme pops up, and if it has the same instrumentation, if it's a flute being like, "Boo, boo, boo," it's like, all right, I've already mixed that flute like 5 times. So I actually have a setting and it's got the plugins, it's got the reverb, it's got all that stuff. So actually, the further I get, I'll open a mix and I'll be like, this actually sound pretty good. Unlike from the beginning where I'm getting all the sounds, I'm sorting out my reverbs. And we really get in the shit, we really get in a groove with the assistant. We have a Dropbox and they'll just upload the ready cues for me. I have a Dropbox that's syncing all the materials the composer's giving to me. So there can be a lot of material, but I'm trying now to get my assistant to just like drop stuff, like get into my computer and then do it all for me because like I don't want to deal with it anymore. But we use like a lot of grabbed folders. So when you grab something, you move it to the grabbed folder. That's why when something new pops up, it starts all working together. File management, naming, all this stuff kind of goes. And then I just end up having a bunch of cues and we use I'm just rambling. It's a big process, but once you do it a couple times, and once the rhythm of, and every movie is different.
Mm,
But these are conversations had before the movie. So we're gonna use Dropbox, or we don't use WeTransfer because we need it syncing. Like syncing is how we have to do it. Box is another one. So
mm,
creatively, Box. It's basically Dropbox, but not as good. Um, so that kind of stuff is what is like kind of how we keep everything organized. And then just a lot of communication too. So every time there's new cues uploaded, we get
mm.
emails. Every time I upload a cue, I send an email. These mixes are in the Dropbox. Dropping the mix, like Dropboxes are insane. We got so much information in the Dropboxes. So
I mean, that sounds like a lot. I think you're more organized than I might be in my spreadsheets.
we
I love
love
it.
a Google Doc. We love a good Google Doc. We love it. Um, yeah.
So one thing that I think is really striking about the film process is that you spend a lot of time also coordinating with different folks who aren't always sitting in the studio with you. You're sometimes often just by yourself in the studio. But also when you're like working on the Bluegrass record, you mentioned you are in the studio with others. I'm curious, like, just in terms of, we talked about the hang vibe earlier, but just like, what is the vibe you like to kind of bring to creative processes? If things get stressful, maybe the composer and the director, you're at odds and you might be caught a little bit in the middle. Like, how do you bring a positive energy maybe to the workflow that you're doing?
Um, I am usually is not as stressed out as the composer and the director, and the composer usually with the director, because my only job is to mix the music. So like really what I just try to do is like to keep the composer calm. And when my
Mm,
job starts getting to be a pain in the ass, I'm just like whatever because we're all on this ship together. You know, with
yeah.
film, a really important thing as far as number one, communicating is important. If you don't communicate, you're going to get email shamed because in film there is such a big cog of people moving. My job is literally to get the music to where they are mixing the entire film together. So if I am sending things wrong, if I'm sending things messed up, they're over there on a stage that costs $10,000 a day sometimes to mix these movies together, and if they're sitting there with a wonky stem, I mean, we're talking minutes wasted here. This is also with scoring stages, by the way. Scoring stages, a day of recording can cost $200,000. So it is very important that you have your shit together. It is very, very important because you can literally waste time the price of a new car if you're not together. So, because in film, it's very funny. You meet people who are not very pleasant and you meet people who are pleasant, but I would say in film, being good at your job sometimes takes precedent, which just happens in records too. But I know records and artists really have to kind of vibe with their engineer. No one wants to work with an asshole engineer. They do. I won't name them, but like ick, right? But in film, I find like being good at your job is actually like, because sometimes we'll be like, that guy's an asshole, but oh my God, he is amazing. And if you make the process go well, like it's great. It's great. It's like that is kind of key because the less hiccups we run into, because usually films like will totally go off the rails. You think like the bigger the film gets, the better it gets, like the easier it doesn't. It gets worse because now you have mega producers, you have big directors, you got big budgets. So they got time, they got money to be throwing things at the wall. Um, love all these people, by the way. I'm not talking shit. I'm just speaking to my experience, which is
Yeah.
and by the way, we don't try to complain during this because it's just our job. So we're just like, all right, cool. We're like reprinting this cue, we're remixing 5 new cues that we're getting cues replaced. We're getting mix notes from the stage. It's a whole situation. So in film, just like being good is very important. Attention to detail is so important. Where I know with records, sometimes it's like, it's like whatever. It's like it's important, but I mean that's a lie. Okay, with certain artists, it's really fucking important. Like you don't see my friend Stuart who works for Beyonce like messing up bounces. Like that's not happening, obviously. But it's just a bit different because I would say the amount of people who are involved.
Mhm. Mm,
So
that makes sense. It also
yeah,
kind of harkens back to what you were saying at the beginning around these roles, especially it sounds like in the film industry. It really feels like the service role too, right? So not getting yourself caught up in the fact that like you might be redoing the same thing 4 different times because people keep changing things because that's just the nature of the job, right?
yeah,
Um, very real. We're
yeah.
going to get ready to move into our Q&A. So people definitely start throwing some questions in the chat. And you can also raise your hand if you want. If you'd like to unmute yourselves, I can call on you. But as you're getting your thoughts together, Eva, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received in your career or in life?
Uh, this isn't advice, but I was watching Love on the Spectrum the other day, and one of the people on it said, "The taco of success drips with the salsa of failure." And I was like, "Wow, that is great."
Wait, I really love that. Where did you hear that?
Love on the Spectrum, which is like my favorite show. I love the show to death. I love these people on this show. It is the best show. It is so great. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's heartwarming. It's amazing. The people on the show, these people are incredible. But she said it. She was just like, you have to remember. I think it was one of the girls, and she was like, you have to remember the taco of success drips with the salsa of failure.
I'm gonna remember that one. That's good. The taco success strips with the salsa of failure. Yeah, okay.
But I would say no. I would say there's a couple. Number one, drop your ego at the door when you walk in. When
Mm,
you're working on something. I have an ego, but like it's not an annoying one. Like drop your ego. Just like don't be shitty. Like in that sense. Number two, one day will be the best day of your life. The next day will be the worst. Hard to find an in between with this gig. It's like one day you're gonna be messing up. The next day you're gonna get the best gig of your life. Uh, that would probably be the other one. And number three, it's all about the hang.
mm.
So
Good. Evergreen advice. That's really great.
yeah,
Um,
those
all
ones.
right, folks, let's hear your questions. What do we got? Looking for hands, or if you want to put things in the chat if you're feeling shy, either works for us. Daniela, oh, worst advice you've ever received, or usual practices people recommend that didn't really work for you? That's a good question.
Worst advice I've ever received. God. I mean, just what how about worst things said? You're gonna end up working at Guitar Center. Thanks for that advice. What is some like bad advice I've received? That is really, God, I've been really lucky to like not receive a lot of bad advice.
Are there
You know,
any things that people like generally recommend that you feel like don't work for you, like workflows that haven't worked for you,
you
or
know, I
yeah?
realized recently there's one I worked on a project last year that was like pretty rough. Like it wasn't really rough, like it was okay, but it was one of those kind of like ego chipping away ones. It's like every day I walked in and I did my best and it all turned out fine. But it was like, as David Attenborough said one time on Planet Earth about this little bird in a mating scene, he said, sometimes no matter how hard you try, your best just isn't good enough. And that really resounded with me because shit, sometimes it's like you can do your best. Um, my dad always taught me that too. He's like, you just go do your best. And if your best isn't, that's all you can do. That is the best you can do. And I am sorry, as you can tell, I just fucking ramble. So, this job last year was tough. I was walking in and it was, like I said, a great experience. But I texted some of my friends, including some mentors, and I was just like, I just don't, this is hard. This is hard. And one of them said, he said, take your emotional investment out of it, like detach emotionally. And I had a thought about that because like this is really rough because in this industry you have to detach emotionally. We get mixed notes all day. So if every time someone told me that like, which mind you, a lot of clients of mine, they don't say it sounds bad. No one's going to say that, but they're going to go, hey, less low and less high. And I have to keep in mind that's a creative decision on their part. It's not that I necessarily missed a
Mhm.
frequency. It's just that I personally wasn't like that frequency is not bothering me. It's bothering them. Or they're like, take something down. It's like, all right, I'm not emotionally invested in that. But when it comes down to actually starting to hit you in like your feels of like not feeling good enough or like not feeling like you're doing a good enough job, I've realized being out here and doing this job so long, I have detached emotionally quite a bit in my life. I'm just dropping life advice here now. And in your everyday life, like when I'm talking about getting validation outside of this career, um, not being emotionally invested in your career can bleed into FYI the rest of your life, like everything
Mhm.
around you, which can be really hard because with what we do, that connecting and disconnecting is something that takes a lot of work. I recently am like, I'm gonna work on this because it's as far as advice goes, I have been very emotionally connected in this career for a lot, and I'm good at not being connected, and I'm good at being connected, but I would just say don't completely disattach because that passion and that emotional awareness is actually what makes clients feel comfortable. And if they're
Mhm.
kind of ragging on you and going, "Oh, you taking that and maybe showing that like you're a bit not feeling good," that is what they kind of want. So tuning out completely, I don't know. And I don't think that was bad advice from him. But it did make me think a little bit because at that point I was like, I don't want to be emotionally disconnected. Like, I don't want that, It's not fun
Mhm.
because it carries into your relationships, your friend. It
Yeah.
really starts it can be whatever. So sorry. I mean, that's that
No, I
advice,
think that's very
you know.
real. Like, yeah, yeah. There's the things that are required and necessary to help you get through, tough jobs that are, and like not taking, as you said, every piece of feedback as criticism. I think that's huge. I think that's evergreen for any
Yeah,
career.
don't take it
But
personally.
making, yeah, but at the same time, you're right. Don't let that harden you to all other areas of your life. I think that's a really lovely way of putting it.
Mhm.
Um, from Ziska here in the chat, on the money side of things as a freelancer, is there anything you've learned that you wish you would have known earlier?
You're saying wait, money?
Yeah, from a freelance perspective, like
Oh,
balancing, I think, some of the franc dollars and cents of that.
make more money. Um, I would just say budgeting is super important. When I was young, I just didn't budget because when you're young and you don't have any money and you're just like going out with friends, it's like,
Mhm.
You don't think about it. Now I really try to budget on top of budgeting food. It's funny because in the budget as a freelancer, sometimes you have to budget in for social stuff, like because it's like you have to go out and meet people. So it's like
Right,
we're
the
going.
networking part of the job. Yeah.
Right, right. We're going to women's happy hour. It's like, oh my God, okay. Like I can't in Los Angeles, any day out, for those of you who live here, no, it's gonna cost you $100. It costs you $100 to walk out the effing door here. And these days it costs that much for, I mean, everything costs so much these days. So I just think that's important. I actually try to budget like a couple months ahead of time.
Mhm.
Um, if I really try to figure and I go in order of what's important to me, but I actually really try to make like fun. People come out here now and they're like, I have this much money. I'm like, you need to have this much money to come out here because you really need to do is budget to do fun things. You have to in Los Angeles. Like there's just not hikes. You can go on hikes, but it's not like if you're out in nature, living in a place close to the mountain. It's just you are, but you're not. And so it's like having money for things like movies, having money for things like going to a show. I tell people to really try to budget that in as long along just so you can go out and get a break, which as a freelancer is important. So yeah, budgeting is just like that. That is the most important part. And FYI,
Yeah.
I suck at it. I still suck at it. And I have a business manager who helps me out, thank God, because oh my God. Also, keeping all your invoices in a thing, keeping your invoices financially together is very, very important. Um, Having a card also for only business stuff is actually pretty smart because for taxes you can print out at the end all your receipts. So even if you have like US Bank, whatever, that's what I have. Checking account, another account. Put money for your business stuff in there. So if you have a Pro Tools subscription, if you're driving only into the studio, back and forth, if you're a freelancer, I like write off my food when I'm working on a project, like whatever. That's also a good financial tip for the end of the year with taxes. That way you're not going through knick-knacking everything in your banking account, banking, checking,
Mhm.
whatever account.
That's huge. That's, I think, really evergreen advice for freelancing. Yeah, definitely try to keep your work and your personal things separate, but do be mindful of the things that are work related that might be, networking or otherwise seen. That makes a lot of
Anytime I go out
sense.
with friends, with work friends, it's like, oh, we're networking. Anytime I go to a movie, actually, I write off my movies
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
because I work on movies.
Um, yeah, of course. From Patricia, what are the most valuable skill sets for an assistant entering the film industry?
Pro Tools, being really good at Pro Tools, and knowing, surround sound is an important thing. So if you have like the basic Pro Tools, it doesn't really come with surround sound. Ultimate does. So you need to kind of know routing. Routing is big, big route, lots of routing in Pro Tools going on. You need to know things like isotope. That's very important in post-production and in, what I do. But that's one of the biggest things I would say is Pro Tools. You need to know things like spotting. You need to know how to work time code. You need to know what time code does, which a lot of people just don't know. I didn't know that. I was like, what does spotting even do? It's like grid, spot, shuffle. And I was like, what is spot? I never got it. But that's the timelines of film is very important because when people are talking sync this and that, so if you're editing dialogue and stuff, that's why I'm saying RX is important. So I would say those things are very Pro Tools, very important stuff. And like knowing an S6 is important, like the matrix is very important to know routing with like Dante and Maddie, just kind of like knowing how all that stuff works, clocking with video sync. Just look some of those videos up. Like, what does this mean? And then you'll be good. Yeah.
Love that. Um, from Quincy, I'd love to know if you have any tips on your networking and making connections if you're just starting out. So we talked a little bit about some of the ways that you've put yourself kind of just out there and rip the band-aid off, as it were. How do you make yourself a good hang, as it were?
Oh, how do you make your, well, don't ask me. You've obviously just been listening to me. Um,
I like hanging out with you, Eva.
networking. Like I said, a lot of it is like not asking about what people can do for you.
Mm,
I also like to um not talk about studio stuff. Always
mm,
at first. I find we even with some of my girl groups lately, like honestly, the conversation to me is a bit old now about the whole men being assholes in the industry thing. I'm also lucky that I don't have to deal with it a lot.
mhm,
I also, if I encounter it, have no issue just calling it out because I just don't give a shit anymore. I am like my own agent. None of these guys can influence my career. I'm on my own path. So for me, talking with women and bonding with people like over personal things for me now is big. Like this
mm,
industry, it's like making that connection is actually really great because when you're working, everyone expects you to know how to work Pro Tools, right? That's like a given. So when you're networking, just asking people about themselves is important. And just kind of, it really just depends on who you vibe with. Like it's really just I can't tell you how to be because I tell people to be themselves. I'm obviously a very outgoing person. I work with people who are not outgoing at all, and that's fine. There's still like a symbi, whatever the word I'm looking for,
mhm,
that works. I know really successful loud people. I know really successful quiet people. Because depending on the artist you're working with, like if you're working with artists, like they don't want you to be loud. It's them. They're the star. And not when I'm in the studio, by the way, I try to be the star when I'm in with an artist. Like, trust me, when I'm with big artists, I'm not saying shit. But basically just those things and like getting to know people on a personal level. We really bond these days, like I said, over trying to find the balance. It's like,
mm,
especially my age. I'm 32. I'm 32. And when I got out here, I was 19. So when I talk about being emotionally checked out for a lot of those times, when you start getting older and you start getting more experience, you start sort of checking in a little more now with like who you are and when you're depending on who you meet and who you're talking to. I would just feel out a conversation with someone and see kind of where they're at in their career. And I always try to gauge like either if they want to talk about plugins, if they want to talk about their love life, or if they want to like talk about upcoming projects, how much work they have, lack of work they have. Asking where people are from is always good. Asking where they went to school is always kind of fun. I know those Berkeley people can definitely bond over that experience. Um, so yeah, I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's something for women. There's so many meetups now with women all over. We are moving the needle. Sound girls, Jesus, they're all resident. I mean, just yeah, look those up too. That's a great way to meet people. Online is great.
yeah,
Great,
yeah.
great.
Um, I love that. I think we heard similar kinds of advice from Susie a few weeks ago, too, around, just is a balance to be had between your own proactiveness and not being too much in people's faces about like you have to kind of like play it a little close to the chest sometimes, which I think is very real.
Yeah, but
But
be yourself.
yeah, be yourself. What a great place to close with. It's 4:03, so I want to be mindful of your day in the studio. I'm sure you've got some things you've got to get to, but really grateful for your time. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to put a closing plug in here to remind you all that we have micro grants. Applications are open and they close on Monday. So if you're looking for a little career development support, these are great funding opportunities. Definitely check that out, as well as scholarship opportunities that are open as well for those of you who are students on the call. So be in touch, keep an eye out, and keep your eyes out on our socials for our next one of these sessions. Thank you to Eva.
Awesome. Thank
Woo!
you guys. Have a good Friday night.